In the U.S. Virgin Islands, green iguanas have made their presence known. They weigh 10 to 15 pounds and reach a length of 5 to 7 feet. They can live up to 20 years. They're primarily herbivores and active for only a short time during the day. They spend most of their time resting, often in trees, but sometimes on rocks. They descend from trees to mate and lay eggs. They are also excellent swimmers and can stay underwater for up to 30 minutes. And they snort. Iguanas have found out that sometimes it's easier to be green than others. The U.S. Virgin Islands of St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix lie about 40 miles east of Puerto Rico and about 1,000 miles from Cuba and the Cayman Islands. Flags of 7 nations have flown over what is today the U.S. Virgin Islands. Thousands of people were enslaved during colonial times, but they organized and sought their freedom on St. John in 1733 and St. Croix in 1848. Today, the U.S. Virgin Islands marks Emancipation Day and the 4th of July with jubilant celebrations. Just over 100,000 residents live here, and another 2 million tourists visit each year, many heading to the Virgin Islands National Park. It's hard for anyone to miss the iguanas. They are just about everywhere people are.
The iguanas, they walk around, number 1, like they're paying mortgages, number 2, like they're paying life insurance policies, and number 3, last but not least, we was here before you anyway. That's the thing about our iguanas. They walk around because they're part of St. John. And it's all meant to be because they was here way before all of us. Right?
People and iguanas have likely been neighbors in the Caribbean for a long time. Early people settled in the region as far back as 2,000 years and probably brought iguanas with them.
One of the main theories is that they came up from South America with the pre-Columbian indigenous people, but they brought the iguana as a food source. Other theories of when the iguanas arrived are they came in the pet trade in the 1950s, 1960s. In order to address exactly where these animals came from, we would need to look at the genetics of these individuals.
The iguanas here today are possibly the result of multiple introductions. These prehistoric-looking animals were likely in the islands when the colonists arrived in the mid-1600s. We are certain, though, that the iguanas have been in these islands since at least the late 1700s. In 1777, missionary C.G.A. Oldendorp described green iguanas on the islands of St. Thomas, St. Croix, and St. John as part of his manuscript about the Moravian religious mission in the islands. Close to a century later, in 1862, a scientific report was published documenting that a green iguana specimen from the Virgin Islands, then under Danish rule, was in the Copenhagen Zoological Museum. A leading herpetologist and zoologist of the time authored the report. As tourism started to develop in the U.S. Virgin Islands, visitors and reporters often wrote travel adventure books. One of these was written in 1928 by Halsey Oakley Fuller, a 12-year-old Boy Scout who included a photograph of an iguana from St. Thomas and described how they were eaten.
They make a fricassee out of them, which tastes like chicken, or to be exact, like frog's legs. You eat only the thick part of the iguana's tail and the legs.
The abundance of iguanas appears, though, to have varied across the islands. For example, in 1888, Dr. Charles Edwin Taylor, a member of the governing Colonial Council, had this to say:
"The iguana is comparatively rare. It is as harmless as possible and as hideous as can be."
Such rarity may be part of the reason that the local legislature passed an ordinance in 1922 protecting the iguanas, possibly from overhunting. It became unlawful to kill, wound, take, sell, or purchase an iguana. The ordinance may have provided protection, but it seems that in some areas, the iguana population might have even disappeared. Some residents recall when they saw few or no iguanas.
On this end of the island, I don't think there were any iguanas, growing up. And they talk about the 50s and the 60s.
I have spoken to a number of people on St. John, and they say that as children, they never saw an iguana on St. John. Even into the 1970s, there were still very few iguanas on St. John.
Halsey, the Boy Scout, offers one explanation.
There are still a few iguanas left in St. Thomas. They were all eaten up in St. Croix and almost everywhere else.
Not everyone ate iguanas, and there may be other reasons iguanas were rare in the past. The situation today is much different. The future of iguanas in the U.S. Virgin Islands hangs in the balance. It might not be so easy here for every iguana, but some are, for now, happily green.
Do iguanas belong in the Virgin Islands?
I'd say why not? If you belong in the Virgin Islands, certainly iguanas could belong in the Virgin Islands. You know.
Thank you.